Hello, and welcome to another episode of Highlights from the Hill. This is part 2 of our Assistant Superintendent editions. Today we have the Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations with us today. So we're going to get to chat with her and see everything that's going on with the numbers. Carol, thank you for being here again, host with me.
Well, thank you, Jim, for having us. This is Susan Rothermick for our friends at home. She is the newly named Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Operations. Her former title was the Director of Finance and Operations. And then when we started to look at the magnitude of the job, we thought it really sort of qualified as an Assistant Superintendent role. So maybe we should talk a little bit about the position. I think when you first arrived, the job was, well, you tell us, what was the job like when you first got here?
Thank you. So that in my role, typically it's always budget.
Yes.
Managing the numbers, making sure that the schools have what they need to adequately support both the students and the staff, and bring along the education to the needs of the community. So that's a big piece of that. Under this also is the management of transportation, cafeteria, and the facilities as well. So looking at capital projects and all of that. So that's a walk into the door.
Yes, and I think one of the first things that you did was you took our cafeteria food service and you made it our own.
Correct. So when I got here, we were being managed by a food service company. And just in looking at a quick analysis, it was costing us a lot more money to be managed by a food service company. So we brought it back in-house. We're able to hire a fabulous director and really bring the food service, the food quality much higher. And food service is a self-sustaining program to begin with. So the quality has improved. With enrollment, we've been able to also really make sure we're serving the kids. We've expanded the number of lunches. We've replaced equipment. So the equipment when I got here was as old as the buildings and was not always functioning. Replaced that, got the lines operating well. And now we're rolling out a breakfast program for the elementary schools. So that's exciting. We have breakfast for middle and high school, trying to bring it down to the little ones who need more supervision. So that's in the process of being rolled out.
Yes, and I think when you arrived, our student population was probably somewhere in the 3,400s, and now it's in excess of 4,200.
Correct.
And so that also means big changes to transportation services.
Right. So we have added buses every single year that I've been here, adding 2 more in the next year budget, just trying to accommodate the number of kids that are riding. But also we really looked at our routes and standardized them so that if this is your stop for elementary, it's also your stop for middle school, it's also your stop for high school. And that's really just to make the stops and the routes more equitable across all grade levels. But we just keep adding buses, we keep adding bus drivers. So it's an increasing demand. But we've also done a lot of nice things. We've recently just rolled out a parent app. So parents can set up a geofence around their bus stop. They can get alerts when the bus is approaching. So really trying to give as much control to parents to really manage their students.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just jump in here for a minute?
Sure.
Just because I'm really amazed, because I've always known you as the numbers person, right? You come before the meetings and you have like a real good concept of all the numbers and stuff, and you're talking about so much other stuff. I assume that's the operations part of your title?
Correct.
So do you do everything?
Kind of.
Like you identify like various and different programs and make them happen and work on them?
Right. So operations really is all consuming, if you will. So another piece that we're working on right now is paperless payroll, if you will, giving the users the ability to put in their own time and really kind of putting that out as opposed to one person sitting there manually entering into an Excel spreadsheet.
An Excel spreadsheet, like hundreds and hundreds of.
Hundreds and hundreds.
Wow.
So we're in the process of rolling out that project now. That was actually the meeting I had literally right before this. So that's another exciting project, really making our payroll and human resources and everything much more efficient. Because as we grow, as student numbers grow, staff numbers grow, the demands on payroll and human resources continues to grow.
Right.
So we're just trying to increase that efficiency.
Wow. Now, I know there's so much solar going on at the schools now. And maybe this is yes, maybe this is no, but have you been thinking about electric school buses?
Actually, I've been looking at electric school buses for years.
Oh.
So I did have a grant from the state a number of years ago. But the problem with electric school buses still right now is they're 3 times the cost of a regular school bus. So the grant that I had 3 years ago, we just didn't get enough money to really make it doable. And that was just to get 1 or 2 buses
Right.
as a trial. So we're still in the process of hunting this down because we use an outside vendor, a contracted vendor. They have been with me all along. We keep talking back and forth about what it will mean to eventually bring along an electric school bus. When we were doing the install for the solar at the bus parking lot, I also brought in a vendor to see if it was possible to lay the infrastructure while we had it dug up for the solar, so that we were kind of somewhat ready. But the industry is changing so fast that you didn't know, or we didn't know, what is the conduit I'm putting under there? And would I be, 5 years from now needing something different?
I see.
So we tried, but we're working with a group in this area and with the state to really kind of study how to get this done. The money that's available right now is really going to high needs communities first. So we're not quite in that line yet. So there are things that have to happen.
Very cool.
But yes, I've been following and involved.
Yeah, and if you want to just talk briefly about the solar projects, because they just all came online.
So they're not all online yet. But we now have fully flooded the roofs at all of our schools. The newest installation on the roofs was adding more to both middle and high school and flooding the roof at Hopkins. Marathon already has solar. Elmwood is the only one that does not have solar at this time. But moving forward with the new building, that will be solar ready when we build. We've also put in the solar canopy at the middle school and a solar canopy at the bus lot. So we're still in the process of getting those fully electrified, and then we need for Eversource to give us what's called permission to operate, and then that's when they'll be lit up. So
We're close.
we're close, not quite there.
And do you own those, or are they a different company where you get like a slice?
Right, so we do not own them. They are owned by the vendor. We use what's called a power purchase agreement. So we use the solar that's generated, and that comes off of our bill from Eversource, but then we are charged a reduced rate, less than what Eversource would have charged us, from the vendor that owns the system.
Gotcha.
So we're getting that differential. That's our savings.
I see.
Yeah.
Nice.
So we've talked about food service, we've talked about transportation, we've talked about solar, and of course, the one big ticket item left is all of the building projects that you've been working on.
Right.
I mean, since you arrived, you put 6 classrooms on the high school, 4 modulars on Elmwood, on Hopkins School, 4 stick-built again on Marathon, to accommodate the growth there in a building that opened in 2018. And now we have a huge Elmwood replacement project and then also a Hopkins addition and renovation project going on. So do you want to talk about all of that building?
Sure. So again, it's all driven by the enrollment. So Hopkinton is what across the state is considered an anomaly, where a lot of districts are contracting in student enrollment. Hopkinton continues to grow across all changes in, economics. Hopkinton still continues to grow. So the additions that we have done so far is just keeping up with the students that we have today. A few years ago, we did a district-wide study to really plan for the future, because as we look at our enrollment growth, and we have two different demographers who have done this, including the state, the MSBA, our enrollment growth is going to outpace what we currently have for our buildings. So when we were looking at Elmwood, the decision was, how do you replace Elmwood and make it advantageous to the community for the growth that's happening, which is why Elmwood became a 2-3-4 school. So the thought process with that is, by pulling in another grade, you have the state paying for a piece of that, which gives relief to the community, but then now it gives us an opportunity to pull a grade out of 6th grade, move that down to Hopkins, and then try to relieve some of that pressure at both the middle school and the high school. So the Elmwood project has been supported by the community, and that is moving forward. There's a lot of exciting information that comes out of that with all the different meetings. It would be a net zero ready school. So it has built with all green technology. With the addition of solar panels, could be literally a net zero school, which is great for the future, great for the community, operationally for the budget is very helpful. But then we go back to Hopkins. The current state right now, we're not able to accommodate the 2 grades that exist even now. There are 28 general classrooms, but yet we're occupying 30 spaces. Mm-hmm. So of course, those 2 additional spaces have been carved out of other areas within the school. We've chopped up the library. We've done all kinds of things to try to accommodate just the students that are there. So even with the modulars, that has not kept up at Hopkins. Yes. On that student population. So when you look at the 2 grades now, with the future of pulling 6th grade down, the population will stay the same where it is now as a 4-5 or where it will be as a 5-6. The population projection of 802, 803 is the same. So either way, there needs to be additional space at that school to accommodate 2 grades. So that is the project that will come to the community at the May town meeting. It's an additional 24,000 square feet that would allow for that 800 student projected population to be accommodated. The cost is still being determined, but it's somewhere between 46 and 48 million that would come to the voters in May.
Yeah, and I think people are wondering, what are the advantages of a new school? And I think in both of those places, there might be 2 different things going on. So there are certainly changes in curriculum. A lot of that is even dictated by the state. So you get new science standards that say these are very hands-on science standards. They are driven by science practices in a lot of ways, as opposed to just the content. So we want kids doing science, for example. And this one is fresh in my mind because last night we had an ESBC2 meeting for the Elmwood project. And at that point, the chair of the committee said, this is an exciting time. All of a sudden, we're thinking about what education is really going to look like in the building. And it's incredible what we're offering our students. And I think now when you look at some of the dated classrooms and some of the limitations on things like science or technology or engineering. In the older buildings, you don't really have those same opportunities that you'd have in a new building. And then I think the second thing that people may not think so much about are the evolving needs of students. So even, it was funny, we had gone back and we were looking at the annual town reports for like 1998, 1999, because we were thinking about when did the Hopkins School originally open? And when you start looking at that, you realize that there were not the ESOL needs, the special education needs, we didn't keep student data like we do now, so you have an understanding of what kids need in terms of remediation and math or ELA. And all of that small group instruction is why we've dismantled a big part of the library to accommodate small group instruction. We've dismantled science labs, for example, at the Hopkins School. And when we take a look at what some of the drawings that the designers have put together for Elmwood and for Hopkins, there's real excitement. So.
Yeah. Now, I remember when Marathon was being built, before it was finished, you needed 4 more classrooms, and you had to have those added on during construction. I remember all the conversation about the MSBA wasn't properly accepting the projections that Hopkinton was expecting, right? So I'm curious now, in today's day and age, where you mentioned Hopkinton is kind of an anomaly where we keep growing, is the MSBA looking at Hopkinton as that and treating us that way?
So it's interesting. They do use Hopkinton as an example of where things went wrong. So they have since been a little bit more aggressive in terms of their enrollment projections. And that's why it was helpful for us to have another enrollment demographer looking at ours. And interestingly, they did come in similar. So that gave us a lot of comfort in the MSBA numbers. So I don't think we'll run into those same issues. However, we're exceeding expectations on our enrollment projections, even with both.
Right.
So we're ahead now of where we should be at the end of this year. Mm-hmm. So the growth just seems to keep coming.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the projection by, say, 2031, 2032 would be to be at that 800 student marker at Hopkins School. And we're at 680 today. Mm-hmm. So we're 120 students away from that, and we are several years away from. You know what else might be interesting? When we were looking at the data from the 1999 annual report, I think that the superintendent at the time reported that there were 434 students who were at the Hopkins School. And if you look at the architectural drawings, the building was built for more students than that. I think that they built it with the sense that you may need to have space to grow. Like I think that margin for us is not that big when we think about the addition that we're putting on to Hopkins and even the amount of square footage really at the Elmwood School. Right. But if you look at the Elmwood drawings, you'll see that there are special education classrooms, ESOL classrooms, that are classrooms truly devoted to that learning, as opposed to, we would be pulling a student out into like a small space that was designed for something else at one point in time.
Right.
Like conference rooms now at Hopkins are no longer conference rooms at Hopkins,
Right.
Yeah.
All right, well, our time begins to grow short. So we've covered like some really major topics on there. Can you tell us something about your job that you love, that you find fun and you really like wake up and enjoy coming in to do?
I do enjoy finding these efficiencies. Mm-hmm. Building is great because it is something, it's planning for the future. So instead of, trying to keep up, we're trying to put the community in the best foot so that, they don't have to continue to worry, hopefully, mm-hmm. about these projects. So it's that efficiency of planning and kind of being ahead of the curve, planning that efficiency, like with payroll, anything we can do to make our operations more efficient is helpful on our budget. It's helpful to the community. It's helpful for students. We're really here to address the students. So the better we are at that, mm-hmm. The better the students can be in their future.
You know who you sound a lot like?
No.
Chuck Joseph. Chuck Joseph, the history guy,
Yes.
is always talking about Hopkintonians of the past, and they had to pull together to build a new school back then or do something else. And he always talked about how forward thinking they were, always thinking about
Right.
the future and what was to come, and not just the moment here and now.
Yeah, I mean that's important. That's how you keep a community thriving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that is one of the things that sort of that innovative piece that you brought here, that it's been a game changer for us. I mean, it's been very helpful to us. I mean, I think a good example is when you asked about moving to electric buses. You know, there's been that vision for a while. We're not there yet, but the planning is there. All
Yep.
of the solar has been incredible.
Yeah. And I assume that delta is getting smaller, hopefully, as time goes along. The difference between the cost of an electric bus versus a regular bus.
There's a lot that has to happen.
Yeah.
Supply chain issues are still a problem, and the thing is, there's so much in the pipeline already for orders that the vendors need to catch up even on those orders before they can start making that production more efficient to bring the cost down. So
Have you thought of
stay
a Hyperloop?
tuned. Sorry.
Have you thought of a Hyperloop? Just put a Hyperloop all underneath Hopkinton.
Right. I mean, the whole thing, the whole effort towards green, that's something that I have dear to my heart. So anything we can do to continue to march along that spectrum is helpful.
Yeah.
So if it's a Hyperloop, we'll go for it.
Yeah, I also think that we've done a really nice job with maintenance. I mean, we continue to talk about like what's going to happen in the future, but I also think that the way we care for the buildings is really helpful. No one wants to talk about the pandemic anymore, but at the onset of it, we were really poised to be in a place where air quality and those things were really, where they should have been at the time. We weren't scrambling to, figure ways to accommodate different HVAC configurations, we were in a good place.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. I think that is going to bring this show to a close. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
Jim, thanks for having us as always.
Of course, it's great to
Yeah.
see you again.
Thanks.
And thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Highlights from the Hill. Only thing I can tell you about the next episode is we won't have an assistant superintendent. But other than that, we don't know who it'll be yet. So please stay tuned, and we'll see you then. Take care.